What do you believe leads men to disconnect from their emotionality? And why do you believe the subject matter around emotional leadership matters?
There's simply no education or training around how to be with certain emotions. Emotional leadership actually make any high performer a even more capable person with more impact, higher level of success.
We got to consider that self-reliance is something we want to use sometimes. It's not something that we want to use as a strategy for everything.
Depression also makes people dangerous. Outlets can be drugs or these type of things, but it can also be uncontrolled anger.
Our worthiness is often defined by our performance, by the way that we're showing up, by our capacity to do. Anything that might take away from that capacity to do is seen as less attractive. Our sensations, feelings, emotions, they're messages of our body. They're signals of our bodies. They're attempting to communicate something to us. This might be our wants. This might be our needs. This might be where our nervous system is at in terms of fatigue. This might be as well an impulse of creativity or an excitement, attempting to orientate or direct us to a certain place. It could be a representation of our values, boundaries, limitations.
Unexpressed stuff is simply creating an additional burden to all the challenges that men tend to take on. There's a big list of emotions men should not express.
Every 30 minutes, every hour or so, ask yourself 3 questions. What am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? What am I needing? It's important as well from us to move from cognition towards actually learning to just be with the raw sensation in the absence of story.
And I would argue it's one of the most powerful
Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in. What is the real value of founders and high-performing men being in close contact with their emotions? And how can becoming aware of what's happening inside of us and learning to lead ourselves through it not weaken our performance in business, but actually strengthen it over time? Welcome back to this episode in the Founder Series, a 6-part journey exploring the challenges founders, business professionals, and high-performing men face today, and supporting them in evolving from high-functioning stress into embodied and integrated leadership, a form of leadership that allows you to stay clear and calm under pressure, by aligning who you are with how you lead. In this conversation, Bjoern and I explore a common issue we see among many high-performing men: disconnection, disembodiment, and emotional numbness. For many, success has come at the cost of losing touch with their bodies and shutting down their emotional experience. Most of us were taught that strength means staying in control and not showing weakness or humanness. Over time, this didn't make us stronger. It hardened us. It kept emotional armor that keeps us functioning, but prevents us from being deeply connected to ourselves or others. So we avoid asking for help. We avoid receiving support. And we look for ways to manage the emotional intensity that leadership naturally brings. The cost of emotional avoidance is high. It disconnects us from the signals of our own body and from meaningful intimacy. It burns us out. It leaves us feeling flat or numb, chasing hits of aliveness through work, achievement, substances, or validation. And in relationships, we often project what we haven't dealt with onto partners, teams, or the business itself, creating rupture and disconnection. In this episode, Bjoern and I explore the ways founders and high performers quietly struggle when they don't yet know how to be with what they feel or work with it effectively. We look at the cost of emotional suppression, the conditioning that teaches men to see certain emotions as weaknesses, and how to return to seeing them as intelligent signals meant to guide us toward more effective leadership. We explore how emotional awareness impacts leadership in real, practical ways, how expanding our emotional capacity, regulating our internal experience, and returning to baseline more quickly after moments of stress can make us far more effective leaders, especially in those moments when pressure rises or when our teams look to us for steadiness. We also explore how a man can move from emotional numbness toward emotional leadership in a tangible way, and how to bring our emotional experience into relationship, whether professionally or intimately. This conversation is for any man who values effectiveness as a leader and wants to step out of the paradigm he's been conditioned into. It's for the man who wants to feel more alive, more connected, and more grounded in who he truly is. If you've been feeling numb, overwhelmed, or disconnected from your inner world, or if you simply sense that more is available for you, I trust that this episode will speak directly to you. All right, Bjoern, welcome back to Heart of Man. I'm really excited for our conversation today within this podcast series. This is a conversation that I know is very close to your heart and as well very close to my own, considering that we both have had our, let's just say, personal journeys around this subject matter. And I would frame it from moving from emotional numbness towards emotional leadership. And here I really want to offer this as an exploration, especially towards the high performers of the world and as well the founders of the world, the business owners. And commonly what I observe within that subculture, let's just say, is this sense of suppression and repression of one's emotional experience. And so I guess it brings up as well the question to just start off. What do you believe leads men to disconnect from their emotionality? And why do you believe the subject matter around emotional leadership matters?
There are a couple of things that are there. I think the first one is that there's simply no education or training around how to be with certain emotions. In fact, we don't even need to go to, let's say, how to handle emotions and how to express and whatever. Even the very training of how to be with something, especially emotion, simply isn't there. That's definitely one thing. Second thing that comes to my mind is that as there, I mean, it is changing nowadays, but at the same time, there is like, say, people that we as men might look up to, that also have no education around expressing emotions, and there is a certain there's a certain range of emotions, a very small range actually, that is, let's say, by society defined as this is emotion man should express, and there's a big list of emotions man should not express. So that's also there for me. And then I would also say that being, say, very expressive in my emotionality is, let's say, not really rewarded by especially the business world. It is still true that if I am not very well attuned to my emotions, and if I am not expressive, if I am just, let's say, presenting a certain type of accepted emotions, a very limited small range, as I said before, it will help me. It will actually support my business success.
Tell me more about that.
Okay, let's use an example here. And again, like as I said, like it's definitely changing, right? And I don't want to basically throw out a stereotype of, let's say, investors, for example, right? But if I am someone that is not very expressive and is more, let's say, cut off from emotions, then I am in a certain way easy to read. I am not of danger to anyone. I'm easy to work with.
There's a certain predictability with it.
Predictability, yeah, it gives a certain security when it comes to working with me, right? And that makes me more attractive. it's like, it's in a certain way, it's kind of like a little bit of a chicken egg problem here, right? Because let's say as an entrepreneur, I'm choosing the path of raising money instead of like just, building a business that is sustainable. So, which is a very valid path that many entrepreneurs are choosing. Like, it makes sense if I want to create something, I find investors, they give me money, I can grow my business. Absolutely nothing wrong with it, right? But if then the people I want money from don't respond well to my emotionality, there's a big reason to hide it, right? So that's, for example, a easy way for like hiding emotions, because it will actually get me something that I need for my business success.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really there.
I'm going to add a few things that I just pondered on as well before we started our conversation today. And especially when it comes to us as men, I consider the fact that our worthiness is often defined by our performance, by the way that we're showing up, by our capacity to do. And so anything that might take away from that capacity to do is seen as less attractive.
Yeah.
It's less rewarding to do that. And I also perceive that, especially when it comes to the subtext of what we've been communicated about what a man truly is, but perhaps as well what we've been overtly communicated towards what a man is. I think self-reliance is something that is very much prided in our culture. And it's seen as a sign of strength.
Yeah.
It's seen as a sign of value, dignity, honor, right? And I don't want to discount the fact that there is a place for that. And I absolutely value self-reliance. I think it's a really important skill for a man to learn. But I think we got to consider that self-reliance is something we want to use sometimes. It's not something that we want to use as a strategy for everything.
Yeah, agree.
And for this identity of, oh, I need to uphold this image of being a strong man, and my image of what it means to be a strong man is self-reliant. It's like it kind of speaks to what you had just suggested, which is it narrows the window of how I can show up. It limits my emotional range, and it actually leads to, ironically, fragility in my eyes, right?
Totally.
I would say as well that that is something that I would like to just bookmark for a little bit later. But I guess another thing that I might just as well want to add here is that I perceive, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I perceive that self-reliance is as well being used not just as a way to demonstrate a level of strength, it's also used for a certain level of armoring or protection. And what I observe is present for a lot of men deep down is that they'd been hurt or that they had been let down, particularly by individuals that they really cared about, perhaps even relied upon. And the vulnerability of the fact that another person didn't show up in a moment when we needed them is a level of disappointment that I perceive a lot of men are not willing to put themselves through again, let's just say. And so I perceive that it forces a lot of men towards self-reliance and a lot of independence, which, unfortunately as well takes us really away from really being in a relationship to each other. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Is that something as well that you're seeing and sensing?
Yes. And I think we're going to explore that later, but just want to say it here already, right? I can be self-reliant and I can have access to my emotions. Like, these two don't exclude each other if we learn how to do it the right way.
Yeah.
There are many ways how to go about, like, or emotionality. But I think we're going to come to that. What I would say before is that this suppression that you already mentioned, or let's say that narrow window of, let's say, available emotions that some men choose to live in, as you said, makes that individual more fragile, because just because emotions are, let's say, suppressed doesn't mean they're not there. and they create stress in the system. Unexpressed stuff is simply creating an additional burden to, let's say, all the challenges that, men tend to take on. So now that's an additional stress that's there every day, basically, and that actually decreases the ability to perform, to get shit done, to have clarity, to move forward with strength and fierceness. So it's actually quite ironic that by living in that narrow range, we actually limit our ability to get what we want.
When I hear you saying that, it sounds so obvious. It sounds so evident, sounds so clear.
Yeah.
I wonder, do individuals recognize that? Do they perceive that? What are your thoughts on that?
I think honestly, I think there's a real change happening right now.
Okay.
Where having access to emotions and being able to be present with them and being able to have like a relationship to my emotions rather than relating from them is becoming more and more important.
Yeah.
And it's becoming more and more not even accepted, but even like encouraged. But not everywhere. And I would still say that this is still the minority. And yeah, there are also like tons of misconceptions, like, from what I observe sometimes is like people moving from like living that narrow window of emotions to like expanding it, but then getting lost in emotionality, right? And not having no ground on and no centeredness where the emotional processes can kind of like float in.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I'm observing. So I would say there's a change. It's still not the majority. And even in that change, there's lots of confusion and like misunderstanding around like, what does it mean to have a relationship to my emotions rather than really relating from them? I think that's something that many people get wrong from my point of view. I mean, what means wrong, right? But it's not. Let's say there's a skillful way how to deal with emotions. There's an unskillful way, and even the skillful, there's once again no, especially for the people like growing up at school stuff. There's no education, no training in a skillful way how to deal with emotions.
Yeah.
Which is insane because that is. I mean, we have. I don't know if there's any science available to it, but I don't know how many emotions we have during a day. I don't know, 10,000 maybe. What do I know? Like many, right? Like happening in that moment, like constantly something floating. So it's kind of like insane to not be trained in like how to relate to that.
Agreed. And I think this is also where I would like to aim our attention towards this conversation. The majority that is still, I'm going to say, operating from this old paradigm, or as well the individuals who might now start to have the conscious awareness of, yeah, this is actually important, but I absolutely have no skill here. I have no idea what to do. Right. And so this is, I guess, where I would like to really structure and direct and orientate our conversation. Before we kind of come into the subject matter of how to actually do this in a skillful manner, because that's absolutely one of the subject matters I want to address, I want to highlight a little bit more, perhaps for the ones who are still somewhat confused, what the benefit might be, but also what the cost might be. I guess one last thing that I might just want to add here on the subject matter of, what leads individuals to, disconnect from their emotions, why this conversation is really beneficial. The way that I usually love to frame this is that our sensations, feelings, emotions, they're messages of our body.
Yeah.
They're signals of our bodies. And they're attempting to communicate something to us. This might be our wants. This might be our needs. This might be where our nervous system is at in terms of fatigue. This might be as well an impulse of creativity or an excitement, attempting to orientate or direct us to a certain place. It could be a representation of our values, boundaries, limitations. And I would even argue being disconnected from that entirely is dangerous.
Yeah.
There's a certain danger to that.
It's totally dangerous. And I think it has to do with like in Western society, we pretty much live in our heads most of the time, right? So without body awareness, it's actually difficult to have emotional awareness.
Yeah.
Right. And it's almost like a battle between head and body, like mind and body.
Yep.
Which is crazy because they are not two, but also not one. They are like in a dance with each other. That's a different topic, maybe. And yeah, there's a real price to let's say, and let's just pick the example that is what we usually see, but we spoke about the numbness and the suppression. There's a real price to it. Like I spoke to the stress that creates. And at some point, for many people, that stress needs to go somewhere, right? It can't be stored in the body forever. And the way I like to look at it is, it's a bit inspired by Gabor Mate, to be honest. But what I'm observing is there are two extremes, and everyone is like somewhere on that range, right? So one extreme is I'm suppressing, but I'm kind of like directing the consequences of the suppression inwards. That, let's say, directing inwards can, in the worst case, lead to autoimmune disease. But it's not I'm using extremes here, right? Then on the other end of the spectrum, there's a person that directs it outwards. That is a person that goes out like partying, cheating, drugs. And ideally, we want to be in the middle, you know? I want to have range. I want to be able to explore all sorts of emotions and like, be able to like move through them. But I think everyone is kind of somewhere in the spectrum, and being on the spectrum where like I take it outwards is in fact maybe even a bit more healthy, because you might go crazy on parties and stuff like that, but you're less likely to become super sick. So yeah, that's something that I observed, and whenever I meet people where I like, say, high performer, entrepreneur or executive, doesn't matter what they do, can even be like, professional athlete. It's very easy to see if the person's like, taking it inwards or like projecting it outwards and living it. So it's kind of like the observation I made, and like many times I find it's true.
Yeah. I like that. I definitely see myself more from the category who takes it inwards.
Yeah, and I'm on the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah,
And
so
it's funny that we're sitting here.
Cool. I love it. And yeah, it would be cool as well for the listeners as well, just to watch that dance of,
Yeah.
how we operate, I guess, differently when it comes to our emotionality. And, I guess what I saw as well in myself in terms of the danger that created in terms of like directing my experience inwards is it just created this deep internal war and like this deep fragmentation of myself, my sense of value in the world and confidence and who I believe myself to be. And, it took me many years to really come into a level of integration and wholeness. And, I'm still on that journey. But yeah, I can, just from my personal experience, I can only imagine. I would probably as well attest to the fact that that inwards experience is definitely more harmful. Let's dive a little bit more deeply into the conversation around the costs of not feeling one's emotions. What do you see as some of the ways that this ends up harming our lives, let's just say?
So let's say you have made quite an effort to like, build your company, for example, and present that image of that perfect entrepreneur that has his shit together and like is successful and like, basically is ticking all the boxes that society wants to see. But then has sitting on that pressure cooker of unprocessed emotional baggage. Then it's gonna explode, and that individual goes crazy with like parties and sex or whatever.
Yeah.
It destroys the image that has been so carefully crafted for so many years. So much effort went into it.
Yep.
Then it just explodes. That's kind of what happened to me, right?
Yeah.
And another thing that comes to mind is like, so let's say you have all that success that you wanted, but it's built again on suppression of truth, because an emotion that's flowing through the body is the truth of that moment. Doesn't mean that it's the truth of the next moment, but it's the truth of that moment. So let's say you're that, that can also lead to like feeling really depressed and feeling numb and cut off from life. So now you're sitting on a huge amount of money, and you have like the car and the house and like whatever you have, your private jet, and you stop feeling.
Yep.
So then there's a point about having all these assets. That's another cost to it. Another cost is that if, let's say, I am that individual, I'm gonna create environments where that happens again, because that's the way I operate. And now let's assume I have reached a certain level in society where I have some impact and power. I'm gonna create environments that operate in the same way, just bringing more individuals that are also the same way, right? So I'm actually like making the problem even bigger.
As Bjoern and I recorded this founder series, one thing became clear. Founders and high-performing men are hungry for a place where they can speak honestly, develop emotional leadership, and be supported by people who understand the pressures they live with. With that in mind, we're opening a small and intimate cohort beginning February 2026 for founders, business professionals, and leaders who want to apply the principles we explore in the series to their lives so they can lead with clarity, emotional steadiness, and integrity, even in high-pressure situations. Now, this is not a large program. It is a focused space where members receive personal mentorship from both of us. Bjoern brings more than 15 years of entrepreneurial experience, investing and advising founders, grounded in years of Zen meditation. My background in embodied coaching, somatic work, and teaching over the past decade helps men reconnect to themselves, regulate under pressure, and lead from a grounded and aligned place. When we tested this approach with a group of founders in Berlin, the response was clear. Men felt supported not just in their business challenges, but in their relationships, emotional life, and inner world. Each month, we will meet for a 3-hour session combining coaching, mentorship, and guided embodiment work. The aim is simple: to help you stay grounded, connected, and clear in the areas that matter most. This cohort is designed for founders and leaders who want to move beyond high-functioning stress, lead their business, relationships, and live in an embodied and integrated way, build a life that feels aligned rather than reactive. You'll be supported by people who understand what you carry and who can help you lead from your core instead of from pressure. If this is the kind of guidance and structure you desire, you'll find a link to join in the show notes.
And there's an interesting thing, I think, how's it called? There's a specific saying to it, I forgot the name of it, but basically that individual who would like, also be, let's say, also be suppressing tons of things, taking on all sorts of burdens and demands from all sorts of people, at some point just explode and disappears. And then let everything go to shit because I couldn't hold it anymore. There's a specific saying for it. A friend told me once about it. And that happens. That like, people create, let's say, a company, and then the company is very dependent on them, and then suddenly they completely crash.
Yep.
And a part of it is like too much stress, too much workload, but likelihood for that happening goes up if also emotional suppression is at play. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love that. I mean, as an exploration and a lot in what you said, and I guess a few things as well that I might want to fill in from my perspective, and as well what I've observed with a lot of the high performers that I've worked with as well over the years. Interesting enough, when a lot of those individuals come to start working with me, a lot of it is around this idea of like wanting to find their purpose to some regard, or having lost a sense of meaning in life. Nothing in life really gives them a sense of fulfillment anymore. And it's like they had built everything that they had proclaimed that would provide them a certain level of satisfaction, and it just doesn't. And there's a certain level of confusion. Yeah. I don't know if you ever read this book, The Second Mountain, by David Brooks, but I love the analogy, and I've been using it very regularly because it just feels so succinct as well to the work that I do. Like a lot of these individuals, they built this first mountain, right? And usually it's based on programming and conditioning, and they're like, yeah, that's what I'm here to do. That's what I'm supposed to do in order. And then when I do that, I'll be satisfied. I'll be happy. I'll be fulfilled. All my needs will be met. I'll have a problem-free life.
Yeah, doesn't work.
And then they get there and they're like, shit, this wasn't it, you know? And that kind of starts the journey of starting to climb the second mountain. But, in order to really do that, it really requires a lot of deconditioning, which is a really, really difficult journey. And actually a really important subject matter that I really want to address here is I think a lot of men are super afraid of stepping into this journey because they're afraid of losing their edge. I think that's a really important subject matter to address here.
Interesting.
Do you see it in that way? And if so, do you have any perspectives?
Interesting. No, I completely don't see it that way.
Okay. I see it a lot. I can share a bit around that.
Interesting. No, man, I don't. Maybe this is because I see the real edge somewhere else.
Right. Probably as a result of all this work you've already done, though.
Yeah, probably that's the reason. But the real edge is somewhere else, so I wouldn't be too worried about like losing an edge that was an illusion, anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, but like, yeah, very curious to hear more about that because like it's something that I wasn't really aware of in a certain way. In fact, I mean, let's say I have more range and I'm well regulated. I can have the ability to be present with what's happening inside of me emotionally and be able to relate from it to it, not from it. That makes me the way more powerful, more impactful person for no matter what I want to do.
Yeah.
By the way, one last comment. Sorry. Suppression also makes people dangerous.
Explain that.
If things then explode at some point.
Yep.
And let's say that outlets can be drugs or these type of things, but it can also be uncontrolled anger, right? And if that then is mixed with some whatever type of experiences, childhood experiences whatsoever, and people get then maybe lost in their anger and that anger turns into hatred, bad things happen, right?
Great. Yeah, I mean, I'm noticing as well, like we're jumping around a little bit.
Yeah.
We got a few open loops, so I'm gonna close a few here. So just on that subject matter of like how I perceive men perceiving or having the sense that they'll lose their edge, I'll just share with you what I perceive a lot of men like struggling with. So first of all, I agree with everything that you said, right? But I have a sense like a lot of these guys just don't register that because they haven't gone through that experience yet. And they only see it from the frame of mind that they have done it. And a lot is going to be around efficiency and productivity. And there is something to say about the fact when I just completely suppress my bodily functions, let's just say, I don't even notice if I need to eat. There is something to say about the fact that I can just push through without needing to follow the ebbs and flows of my body and what my body communicates to me. Yeah. And I perceive that that provides some men with a certain level of control. And I would argue each of these men will, to some regard, have had some form of experience, probably in their younger years, where they had emotionally collapsed. This could be as a result of a death in their lives. This could be as a result of a heartbreak. I think that's a very, very common experience. And they had very often remembered that or imprinted that as an experience, which I have a sense has offered them the message that emotions are dangerous. It is dangerous for me to go into that experience because then I'll lose myself. I'll lose who I am, right? I will lose my edge. I will not be able to follow the straight line anymore. I'm going to just be this floating seaweed in the ocean. Yeah, just being pulled by life in all kinds of directions. And you can see that with some individuals as well. I think there can be some accuracy to that even, right? However, I would still argue the fact that if you're able to do it in a way skillfully, especially with an experienced facilitator or a guide, let's just say, that can support you on that journey, it actually leads to even a bigger edge. It leads to even more resilience. It leads to even more capacity. It
Totally.
leads to even more range,
Yeah.
which is what all these men want. But I think it really requires someone that they can really trust.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also another thing, right? I mentioned the fact that a lot of these individuals will have learned self-reliance. And so to step into this type of work, I would argue it can't be done alone.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be done in relationship,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of these woundings occur in relationships. So they also have to be tended to in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And to really trust someone to open that up. Like I've had a few prospective clients, where I'd have discovery calls with them, and like they would gently poke me and they would ask me, hey, like I have a fear that, if I'm going to open up in this way, that you might not be able to hold me. And I'm so grateful that they bring that to
Mm-hmm.
me, and like I feel very, I have a very strong conviction that I can really carry someone through any emotion, due to as well a lot of the training that I've done, particularly in FBR. But I think it's a really valid fear to have, and I think it's a very wise fear as well, right? But um, it doesn't dismiss the fact that I think it is still an important aspect to lean into,
Mm-hmm.
and not to succumb to that fear.
Interesting. Maybe I've never experienced that because when I started to, let's say, explore my emotions and what they did and didn't do to me in the past and so on, right? I was at a point where I was like, so cut off from, let's say, life and joy and these type of things, that I was like, I mean, there's not much to lose here. Let's try this emotion thing.
Yeah.
If that doesn't work, fine. But like,
Right.
if it destroys me, then like there wasn't like
Yeah.
there wasn't like much to lose anymore.
Right. So what
You
I'm
know?
hearing is that the pain was big enough for you,
Exactly.
right? And I would argue this is unfortunately where we're at as a society, that we have to be in that position where the pain is so fucking great. We're like, I don't have anything to lose anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's unfortunate. I don't perceive that we need to come to that place,
Yeah.
but it appears to me in society, in our collective consciousness, that's the degree of pain that we gotta bring it to until we actually do something about it.
Agree.
It's where I needed to get to.
Yeah.
And I have a sense that if it's not painful enough for some men, if they still say it's not that bad, but it's also not really great,
Mm-hmm.
very difficult to actually
Mm-hmm.
come from that place. That's where that negotiation happens. That's where I've observed it.
Yeah. Agree. Agree.
Well, let me just add a few more things as well that that stuck out for me in terms of this conversation around the cost of that, and it kind of addresses as well the fact that you had suggested around the danger aspect of it, which I absolutely agree with. Is like the buildup of emotions leads to us eventually projecting that onto other people.
Mm-hmm.
It can be the ones that we love. It can be our business partners. It can be our team. It can be other individuals. We can also tend to micromanaging them or controlling them because we need them to operate in a certain way so those emotional triggers don't come up.
Mm-hmm.
And so that leads to a lot of control mechanisms, essentially a lot of unsafety, a lot of harm, whether it's towards self, whether it's towards other. And the unfortunate thing as well that I really perceive is that the more we flatline, the more numb we become, the more we're grasping for an experience of aliveness.
Yeah.
Because we can't feel anything anymore.
Yeah.
And this is unfortunately where we are directed towards addictions.
Mm-hmm.
It might initially start with approval seeking, validation, chasing dopamine hits, but then eventually it just becomes bigger and bigger because we're looking, I would argue, we're looking for a sense of connection with ourselves again.
Yeah.
And we're doing that through all this grasping.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
not the place to get to. And what's really unfortunate about that, which is what we brought as well in the conversation around sex, is the fact that a lot of the strategies that we're using in order to feel that sense of aliveness create a level of guilt, fear, and shame in our
Mm-hmm.
system, which then we our attempt to find relief from by doubling down on the same strategy. So it's a really vicious downward spiral, and it just keeps people in there,
Definitely been there.
Yeah.
So can definitely relate to that. Yeah.
Anything else you want to add on that?
Well, it feels pretty complete to me. Maybe it's just little side story, but like I've once worked at investment banking, just an internship, right? And I recently saw that so they had this managing director, and he like massive control issues, and like he would like have these outbursts like every X days. He would just completely freak out and shout at someone.
Yeah, well.
Died 45 years old, heart attack.
Oh man.
And now I don't know the circumstances whatsoever, but I think there's a correlation between, let's say, suppression, then like these outbursts, and heart failure, heart disease. So I think there's a real cost in the body to living in that narrow range. I think it decreases quality of life, but it also makes us sick. And that goes like two ways. You can like something that is more, let's say, creeping into the body and slowly killing it, like autoimmune disease, or it can be this like simply too much energy running through the system, trying to get released, heart attack, kind of thing. I'm not a scientist and also not a doctor here, but I think there's some truth to these statements that there's a real cost, real cost to that, and if it goes on for too long, there can be a cost that we can't recover from. Like I can still see inside of my body, and by now I'm like quite strong, very fit, super healthy, and I still see some areas inside of my body that will probably never fully recover. Whereas like now with the knowledge that I have, I can see how suppressed emotion kind of like were stored in that area in the body, and I can still see that like the tissue texture there is not the same like other parts. It's very likely to start storing fat. And it's probably never going to be on the level that other body parts are, because there's been too long, too much suppression in one area that created a certain imprint, let's say.
Interesting.
And I don't want to make it too woo-woo here, but I think there's truth to it.
Yeah, I just consider the fact that any form of emotional holding where we're actually not directing or are unable to direct our ability to come into a certain form of processing or completion of the emotional intensity or trigger that's there, it will lead to a certain level of bracing within the body, which will eventually lead to, habituated holding patterns, which is a stress in the nervous system, right? And there is this like perceived notion that we'll come to that we're still in that threat situation that might have occurred like 10, 20, 30 years ago. And man, I mean, I think it's just it's a very vicious cycle as I see it. Especially, I consider like how it just has such a damaging effect on relationships, right? How it leads to a level of disconnection. It leads to a level of disconnection from self, from others, from the level of intimacy we can have. It leads to sexual dysfunction. So I mean, we can go on with that, and I don't think we need to like really add or bring more, I guess, wood to the fire around that subject matter, but it seems quite clear on that. I wonder if there's anything you would like to add around the strategies that you perceive that individuals use to attempt to manage their emotionality.
I mean, it depends a bit on, let's say, where I look, right? So let's say I could now take a look at, let's say, the friends and people I got to know through, let's say, my work within spirituality and personal development. They would say they have very healthy tools how to manage their emotions, right? They use certain breath work, they use maybe meditation, they use working with coaches, they have like man circle. They maybe have certain rituals around like, coming together and express and like move through cycles of expression. So there are many very healthy ways how to do that. And then I can maybe take a look at other social groups that I'm connected with that tend more towards very unhealthy stuff, which is typically partying, alcohol, other sorts of drugs, porn, sex, excessive sport, because there's a level that we can train the body in a healthy way, and then we can just do it excessively. That then increases stress hormone and also leads to diseases. An inability to rest. So like
That's a big
hyperactivity. Hyperactivity is the big one to just avoid feeling something. But then the inability to rest, guess what? It's poor sleep quality, which is the one thing. Like if there's one thing, I hate the longevity movement, just for a record here, but there's one thing I learned from it, which is like there's this one thing, there's most the powerful one thing is sleep, right? If you're not on a diet, just sleep all day, basically. It's just exaggerating here, but so that it massively fucks with our quality of sleep, so also leads down the same route than the others. Yeah, so it's kind of like what I'm seeing. And then there's also a healthy and unhealthy way to use relationships to manage emotions.
Let's bookmark for relationships for a little bit later.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely want to dive a little bit more into relationships and how we do that. But maybe, share with me a little bit around the unhealthy way, and then we'll explore how we can bring emotions in a more constructive manner later on.
You mean in the context of relationships?
Yeah. Like what would you say are like one of the some of the harmful ways that we attempt to manage our emotions through relationships?
So one way could be that, let's say, because I am completely unable to be and feel my emotions, I just basically, in any type of relationship, can be romantic relationship, can be friendship, just basically throw all my shit on another person. That's a big one.
Take care of me.
Exactly. That's a big one. Or I want to feel certain things. So then I bring a certain behavior into a relationship to provoke a person to behave in a certain way that then can give me the opportunity to feel in the way that I wanted to feel, which is, complete mindfuck, but these things happen.
Yeah.
I'm for sure guilty of that, at least in my past. So yeah, that's a few of the more unhealthy things, I would say. Another thing that I see is like basically being in a certain relationship and someone having certain emotions that I can't hold because I don't have a relationship to these emotions, and then trying to how do you say that, invalidate,
Invalidate them, fix them, manage them.
manage them, invalidate them, just manage it rather than just like letting that be there. So that's a few of the unhealthy outlets, I would say.
Can also be towards like nice guy tendencies, right?
yeah.
People pleasing, being dishonest, withholding, like attempting to always make her happy and ensure that she never gets upset, not allowing her to have her emotional experience. Oh man, like all of getting defensive, like those are all kinds of ways that this can show up.
Yeah, agree.
Good. Well, let me just feel into if there's anything else I might want to add around that subject matter. No, this feels quite complete for me. One of the things that I believe could be cool to explore is some of the emotions that I believe are most shamed in society, particularly when it comes to men experiencing those. And one of the things that I always consider is that for me, there's no such thing as a bad emotion. Right? I really don't look at it from that lens.
Can't, like, emotions occur, right? They're a truth of a certain moment. They just occur. So how can they be right or wrong? So I can make a conscious decision to do harm to someone. That's obviously wrong, right? But an emotion is just there out of the blue. Like life would be much easier if certain emotions simply wouldn't show up, right? So with that, it's impossible for an emotion to be right or wrong.
Yeah, and I guess what you're highlighting as well is that there's a certain wisdom to that. I mean, there's a wisdom to the fact that this has been evolutionarily passed down. right? We have continued to experience that. And if it wasn't wise to have that, I would propose that we wouldn't carry that.
Yeah, totally.
And so this is, I guess, the frame that I really want to offer here, that there is a certain level of wisdom that each emotion will carry. And so I want to bring in some of the main emotions. I'll just offer the name, and then I just want to, I guess, popcorn just any ideas that you have around the value of them and the wisdom of them, and as well, um, anything that you believe might be important to share around that. Does that feel clear?
Let's go.
Amazing. Before I do that, I guess one last thing I might just as well want to name is the fact that we have primary emotions, and then as well we can have secondary emotions that are coupled onto those emotions. Often it's going to be through such a certain form of conditioning, fear, shame, and guilt, right? So as an example, there can often be the shame that women have towards anger, whereas men have a lot of shame towards sadness or grief. And so this is essentially coming through the subtext, the stories, the identities that we are attempting to uphold in society and culture. Yeah. And I think an important aspect is for us to challenge those, is to untangle those secondary emotions that we have added on top, so we can actually just allow the free flow of those emotions. Yeah.
Got it.
So that's the reference that I just want to offer here. So all of those emotions that I'm going to now present to you and want to just offer a little exchange towards, they're going to have some form of fear, shame, guilt that we've imposed onto those, right?
Yeah.
And I want to challenge those and look at the purity of those emotions. That's how I would propose them. Ready? Grief.
Wisdom of grief is for me, it has the potential to connect me back to myself on a very deep level. It even has, let's say, kind of like a deep spiritual quality.
Expand on that.
Exploring grief can take one really deep and can expose me to the impermanence of everything of life, which is a contemplation, around like, how the fuck is that life actually working? Like, why are we born and why are we dying? Like, who invented that, right? So the impermanence, grief has not to do with impermanence. So that's an exploration, a contemplation that can lead very deeply into like spiritual insight even.
Yes.
So deep wisdom in grief, one of the most difficult emotions to hold because it can be quite intense and quite heavy.
Totally.
So yeah, that's what there in terms of wisdom.
I think there's a certain loss. We experience grief as a result of some form of loss.
Exactly.
This could be an actual loss, but it could be also a loss of a dream, right? It could be loss of something that we were hoping for, that were to happen, and all of a sudden we realize it doesn't. There's this ending that is connected to this idea of grief, and it's almost like a cycle that we need to go through in order to come into completion to the other side of it. But it seems like a lot of us interrupt that.
Yeah, totally. And I love what you say, because that's an important distinction. Like, many people believe, I tend to believe that as well in the past, that grief is only there if there's like something big happening, like lost a family member, lost a partner, or whatever, right? But there are we experience grief on a daily basis.
Totally.
Like very small little events, as things that you just mentioned, and without a way how to like run through that cycle and process, we create grief backlog, basically. And then at someday when the grief backlog is too big, like, then shit's gonna show up.
Yep. That's when we're gonna attempt to soothe ourselves, emotionally manage, right?
Exactly.
That was a big one for me. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
A lot around porn, addictions,
Yeah.
food,
Yeah.
all little ways, right? And then we're like, what the fuck? Why do I do that? I know I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I don't want to engage in these behaviors. But I think there is something to say about the fact that unless you're literate, I'm going to say, in this subject matter, unless you're aware of it, you don't even notice the fact that there's all these micro griefs that we experience on a daily basis.
That's true. I just want to add something here. I did research on it and with myself. So there was a period in my life where like I felt some level of grief, and immediately there was an urge to like watch some porn. I tried it for like, I can't remember exactly how many events, but I tried for like a couple of them. I said, okay, now I feel there's something, feels like grief, like or now there's the urge to like soothe myself, porn or sex, and now I choose to do some breath work. And in all of these, like, and did it basically just, little mini journey with myself, just like breathing a bit, meditating, right? All of these journeys without any visuals, without any like stories whatsoever, I simply started crying. And guess what? Afterwards, the desire for sex or porn or other type of drugs was gone.
Yeah.
So there's that. I studied in myself, and I can clearly confirm.
So fascinating how that is, right? I mean, another thing as well that I would just want to say as well is that to me, grief is a demonstration of our capacity to love. If we were not to love so deeply,
Totally.
we wouldn't experience grief, right?
For sure.
I'm actually doing a lot of research right now around Dr. Robert Glover, and because I'm going to have him on my podcast on Friday. And I've already had him for one interview, and he had shared with me that he perceives that the meaning of life is to have our hearts to be broken, right? Because there is something that he has experienced due to an ayahuasca ceremony and all that. He's come to recognize that we experience heartbreak as a result of our capacity to love, right? And it comes as as an extension of that.
Yeah.
If we wouldn't love something so deeply, we wouldn't actually feel the grief around it. Yeah. And so I would argue if we can actually allow ourselves to go through that as a capacity, it can connect us more deeply to that aspect of us that loves, that aspect of us that feels so deeply, that cares so deeply.
Yeah.
The thing is, most of us, we attempt to armor that up. We attempt to protect that, and that's a huge one as well for me.
Yeah.
I experienced heartbreak in my life. I'm like, I don't want to ever feel that shit again. Let me just put a lot of armor around my heart, not feel any of that. But that also limits and takes away from my capacity to feel love or joy. Yeah. I think joy is the other side of grief.
Yeah. Agree. And I just want to say, if there's anyone listening that's going through a deep grief process, especially a grief process like that is initiated by like death of a loved one, this is heavy and some armoring around the heart. I just want to label it as like very normal and actually a wise thing.
Yeah.
And just wanting to like mention that here, like that, yes, that is tough and that's very hard and it's gonna like take time and work. So like, yeah, just so we don't take grief lightly. I was just here to just mention that.
I appreciate that. And as well, I guess I just want to as well highlight the fact that this is not so much a conversation around how to move through grief. The intention is really about destigmatizing these emotions. And if anyone as well is interested around exploring this conversation around grief more deeply, I would suggest you listen to the conversation I did with Joshua Winner and Dewey Freeman. I think those are two really wonderful conversations to explore this idea of grief, because it's definitely something that I've as well explored in our podcast here.
Let's do another one.
All right. Anger.
The wisdom and anger is protecting on my own boundaries. It's ultimately also wanting to protect my health, my body, my mind, basically my whole being.
Yeah.
From it's a good sign for where am I not authentic. So it actually helps me to realign my life with like, or the way I'm living with my values, with my capacity, with what I can actually do. Helps me to, it can even be a good indicator for like finding my meaning in life.
Love it.
So big wisdom there.
Good. I like it. I guess I would want to add as well the fact that what I perceive, especially with a lot of men, is that anger shows up as a protective emotion
Mm-hmm.
for a more tender emotion that's underneath it.
Mm-hmm. Which one?
Usually it's fear or some form of hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they're attempting to protect themselves with that. Um, often in this like pop psychology culture, there is often this communication that anger is a secondary emotion. I would argue it can show up as that. I don't believe it is a secondary emotion itself. I think it can be a very primary emotion.
Yeah.
Right. And I think of the poet, I don't know if you know him, David White. But I love one of these ideas that he had shared about anger, which is that anger is one of the deepest forms of compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And I really have a sense and felt sense of that. And I really believe in that, as someone who's a very fiery man, let's just say, that sometimes I experience anger in a situation. And to me, it's because of the demonstration of love that I carry, for whether it's for my partner, an ex-partner, or, something that really matters to me.
Oh yeah, I can relate
I
to
want to
that.
protect
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to me, it's not so much of a demonstration of like my unhealthy aggression, quote unquote, but it's really actually a demonstration of my love.
Yeah.
How I wield that is another conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think there is something to say about um, removing the shame around it. And I think another thing as well, just to add here, is that in the absence of us being integrated in our anger, there's going to be no ability to actually be as well connected to our assertiveness,
Mm-hmm.
to our level of direction,
Mm-hmm.
clarity, sharpness, structure,
Yeah.
right?
Agree.
Power.
Yeah.
And it requires us to actually integrate that as a capacity to befriend.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Let's do one more.
Let's do it. Fear. I think there's a huge stigma around fear, especially amongst men.
Yeah. To me, fear, wisdom and fear is on a very basic level, wants to like protect our life. Like it's wise to have fear. If there's like, a tiger coming around the corner, it's like super wise. Like when I had fear, which just kill me, right?
Yeah.
There's just many, there's a countless number of situations where it's wise to have fear and to respond to it in a certain way. And that brings up something else for me. In many communities, I've encountered the idea of, let's say, becoming fearless. I think that's complete bullshit, to be honest. I think fearlessness doesn't exist, and if it exists, it's fucking dangerous. If I hadn't had any fear, I would probably be dead by now.
Yeah.
So, like, the idea of, like, becoming fearless is just a waste of time. What it comes down to me is courage. So I can see the fear, I can assess the fear. I develop the capacity to make an assessment of the fear that is present. Look at everything that is there, assess the situation, and then decide to maybe have the courage to still go into a situation while there is fear, or decide, it's wise to, let's say, avoid that situation because it's maybe going to cost my life, right? That's courage. Fearlessness is basically, if I want to become fearless, I can as well also go and die.
Absolutely love what you're saying. And no, it's good, man. It's so good. I mean, this is as well how I usually as well frame fear around. Like it really, to me, is a call. It's an ask to actually deepen in the virtue of courage,
Yeah.
which I hold very strongly in my life. And so for me, moments of fear are not something to discount or say, oh, no, I shouldn't be feeling fear. It's something that demonstrates and communicates to me there's something bigger here to rise towards, right? There's an edge of growth here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there is something as well to say about the conversation around perceived threats and actual threat.
Yeah.
Of course, with actual threat, we genuinely want to feel fear, and it actually keeps us safe. It protects us. And we got to as well highlight the moments where we perceive a threat that is actually not a literal threat, right? I mean, there's often that analogy of, we look down and we perceive a snake going down on the ground, even though it's actually a rope.
Yeah.
And so this is also something that I believe fear gets to teach us. And it is in those moments when it's actually a perceived threat that this is where we get to as well, train in the virtue of courage.
Totally. Let's take fear of rejection for an example, right? If I get rejected, let's say, I'm on a date and then I get rejected, I'm still alive.
Yep.
I still have the same amount of friends, I have still the same amount of money, same food, same water, same house. Nothing has changed. So it's kind of like, it doesn't feel nice, but my life is not in danger.
Yeah.
That's something where I can then develop the courage to step into it and just come out alive on the other side.
I'm actually going to share a story around that. I recently decided I just want to get off dating apps. I just don't like that as a model of meeting people. And I actually think it weakens us as men. I mean, I could just share more on that, but I'll leave it here as an idea. And, I just came to recognize, hey, like if I really feel the genuine impulse to actually approach someone and talk to someone, I will do that. And so I had that recently come up a few days ago, and I was just at a cafe and I was having a coffee, and then to my left, I saw a woman where I just felt this genuine impulse, and I was just like, oh shit, And I just realized I knew that if I wouldn't approach her, I would look myself in the mirror at the end of the day and would experience a certain level of regret. And so for me, it was really about upholding a certain level of dignity and honor towards myself, whether I, receive her affection or her approval of me approaching her or not, doesn't really matter. It's really about, can I look myself in the mirror at the end of the day and say that I did what I knew was right for me. Now, what I want to communicate here is I noticed all this fear in my system. I noticed my heartbeat all the way up to my throat. It was, first of all, it was super amusing. I actually looked at it more from a level of amusement because like 12 years ago, I was actually exploring approaching people on the street, just to as well overcome some of my approach anxiety. So it was so interesting how, I did all this work 12 years ago. It's still here. It's still here. And so there's something funny about that. But the recognition that I came to as I was regulating myself before I approached her was, I'd rather feel this than feel emotionally numb. I'd rather feel this. I'd rather feel the mix of aliveness and emotion.
Sure.
And that's the thing that I said. Like I felt alive. There was no evidence needed if I exist or not. I fucking exist in that moment.
Yeah.
I'm alive.
Yeah.
And I was like, who gives a shit? Who gives a fuck? I've experienced numbness. I've experienced complete desensitization. I was disconnected from myself. And I knew how miserable my life was when I had that. I no longer want to have that. And so, regardless of what the emotion is, whether it's deep experiences of despair, whether it's deep anger, fear, I want to have the capacity to move through that.
Yeah.
I think there's something beautiful about that.
What's your view on shame?
So that's the next one that I want to bring in. So I think it's perfect. So we got to distinguish between toxic shame and healthy shame. I don't want to go so much into toxic shame today because I think it's a little bit of a deeper conversation. And I would actually argue internalized shame or toxic shame is an attachment wound. It's a really very young wound, as I would suggest it. But I think the wisdom in shame is the fact that it actually keeps us in community.
Yeah.
It keeps us in relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like healthy shame demonstrates to us where we've been out of line. Yeah. Where we have stepped out of our standards.
Yeah.
What's important to us. And something as well that Alison Armstrong said when we had a conversation was only honorable people actually experience shame. So just let that land for a moment. Only honorable people who have a certain level of honor experience shame. Individuals that don't connect to that virtue of honor, they won't experience shame around their actions.
Yeah, true. Makes sense.
Yeah. So I think that changed a lot in terms of my perspective around shame. I feel the level of care in shame. Yeah. It's actually about wanting to belong.
Yeah.
It's wanting to be part of something, to be part of tribe, to be accepted, to be loved, to be welcomed as we are. That's beautiful.
And also to survive. Like, right? It's living in a tribe is important for survival. So it's deep
Definitely.
wisdom that protects once again, like just making sure we can actually live on the planet as a human being.
Big time. So anything you would like to add on that subject matter?
Super complete.
All right, last one. Ready for it? I think this might be a little bit of a curveball, but it makes a lot of sense for me, and I would argue it's probably one of the most suppressed ones. Joy.
Joy, a reason for living.
But I genuinely believe that men's capacity to experience joy is very limited.
Oh yeah, big time. Big time.
And men feel shame around it. Men feel shame around experiencing joy.
Do you know why that is? I mean, I agree to it, first of all. Completely agree. And definitely been my exploration around that.
Yeah.
And joy not to be confused with moments of happiness, right? That's a different story.
Yeah.
Very important distinction here from my point of view. So why do you think is that there's shame around joy?
I think it connects us to experience genuine joy. This is going to sound a little woo-woo, but for me, it completely disintegrates our identity. Like when you're in pure ecstasy and pure joy and play and fun, and you're just allowing yourself to like surrender to that as an experience, who you perceive yourself to be as a person, it just like gets completely obliterated.
Totally, man. I can,
similar to the moments of like deep orgasm.
Totally. I give you a great example. Like the, let's say 90 years old Zen master of the Zen master that I'm working with, who's already like very experienced. That guy, if I just observe him, it's like a child. He's full of joy. And like, yeah, he has like, if you want to like grasp and describe his personality, it's almost impossible. This guy's like, as he has, let's say, transcended most of his personality and is just enjoying no matter what happens, right? Doesn't mean he doesn't have any emotions anymore, and he even owned that he can get angry, but even also child can get angry, by the way. So I think you're right. Like it completely tears our personality apart.
Yep. And it's also a very young wound, I would perceive, because like think of like us as little boys and, you know, just being like boisterous, adventurous, risk-taking, you know, like tussling with each other. I think, you know, especially if you look at like German culture, like we're supposed to put it in a box.
Yeah.
You know, be good, be obedient, you know, don't be too loud. And so there is already like all this subtle shaming, too much expression, too much aliveness, too much joy is not okay.
100%. I can say for myself that by the time I started going to kindergarten, that's where I lost joy for at least a good half of the day. On that day, basically. I still remember, like, if I go back in, like, some, you know, breathwork journeys, whatsoever, as if, like, there's been sun shining into my life, and suddenly there's a dark cloud. And before there was joy, and afterwards there was, like, a very, like, diminished level of, you know, the joy I was able to access before. 100%.
Yeah.
Super old wound.
And I think added to that is this idea of pleasure.
Yeah.
I think they're different, but I think there is something to say about pleasure. And again, so many men are very disconnected from pleasure. I mean, just look at the way we have sex.
Yeah, man, but like the best orgasms are the ones where it's like just enjoying like the ride, like literally the ride. Just enjoying it are the best orgasm. I think orgasm is an entry point into joy. And now we don't want to talk about, you know, sexuality here, but like let's say not the having sex, heading straight for the orgasm thing. That won't do it. It gives us some pleasure. But there's a way of experiencing orgasm that opens, at least me, opens me to joy and even puts me into a very joyous state afterwards, where I'm just like, I remember like I had one of these orgasms and I just afterwards came out on my terrace and I was like, what the fuck, how beautiful is that life?
Sex is an expression of play.
Yeah, man.
I mean, it doesn't have to be only play, but it is a huge, important way that how we play as adults.
Yeah, man. 100%.
Play is absolutely essential for us to access joy.
Yeah.
I think, big piece as well that I might just want to add around pleasure is that, we can have pleasure at any moment.
Yeah.
It's actually irrelevant of what the experience is. I've had moments where I've been in deep despair and there was something pleasurable about that in a really fucked up way.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you've experienced that, but it's like I'm like with this like deep guttural, like grief, and it's just like purely somatic. And a part of me can really go through that and be like, oh, I feel so alive. It feels so good. Like even just in this moment, I'm sitting here with you in this podcast studio. How present can I bring myself to the fact of how amazing this is?
Yeah.
Like that we're sitting here, that we get to have this conversation about things that are meaningful to us, that we get to support other listeners within this subject matter, and hopefully as well provide some value to them. Like if we can just really tune our attention towards that, there's so much pleasure to that. And here is our access to joy again.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. The last thing I might just add as well to that is like, as you know, I've done a lot of men's work over the years, and it can be quite common as well that to bring in some form of dance in within containers. Could be, in retreats, could be in workshops. And like, I think there's nothing that challenges a man's identity than that, especially the rigid identity, like around needing to be a certain way. But when we actually let ourselves go in that, it's fucking liberating, man.
Yeah, totally.
It really can be.
Totally, man. Still remember first time I went to an ecstatic dance. I was like, what the fuck am I? Like, that was like a nervous system boot camp for me the first 3 times. And like afterwards, I just started really enjoying it. But yeah, I can relate to that. Should we spend a bit of time on like skillful versus unskillful, kind of like dealing with emotions?
I would like that. Yeah, I would like to offer a framework, ideally, of how we can support individuals around moving from, let's just say, emotional management, control, avoidance towards emotional awareness, and then eventually emotional leadership. So, yeah, perhaps you start off and then I'll pick up the ball afterwards.
But I think we spoke a lot about like the cost to emotional avoidance and stuff, right? So I would go to the how to skillfully be with emotions. I think what's here for me is
Can I pause here for a moment?
Cool.
So let me offer you a really distinct question and then perhaps orientate ourselves towards that. A man who is like, I don't know how to deal with my emotions, and now I need like in a way, a formula, as simplistic as it might sound, and as part of us might resist towards that. But like, what is the formula that you would provide him in terms of like, hey, bro, these are the things that I would like you to do in order to now start leading yourself through your emotions?
So first step for me is to, and I'm gonna come to how we can do that. But first thing is develop the capacity to be with an emotion.
Yes.
That's important, and it's being with means I will have a relationship to my emotions, but I will not relate from them. So
Expand on that. What does that mean?
if I relate from an emotion, let's say I have anger, I go act it out. That's relating from. Relating to is the capacity to investigate. Where does it come from? What does it want from me? Where is its wisdom? And then choosing to not act it out, or choosing to act it out in a healthy way. For example, I'm super angry. I don't want to bring it to the person that I'm blaming for me being angry, which is then in fact also just a story we need to investigate. But then I bring it to my boxing class, for example. Healthy outlet, nothing wrong with it, just right. So developing the capacity to have this process, to like relating to it means investigating, understanding, not having like being able to resist the urge to like immediately do something with it. right? And then also be able to make the assessment, okay, where is an emotion, let's say, appropriate to like now express it, and where is it maybe not ideal to do it right now, right?
Good.
Um, though there might just be a situation where it's not wise for me to, let's say I'm in a boardroom, in a board meeting, and then I know that there are sitting, let's say, 10 very rigid kind of investment bankers without wanting to stereotype our investment bankers, which is the first thing that came to mind. And they hurt my feelings for whatever reason. It might not be wise to start crying for half an hour in front of them. I might just hold it together, but then not push it down, but maybe like find my brother or find my partner or whatever and ask them if they can hold space for me and then let my emotions run.
Let me piggyback on that because I think it's really important. I really want to make clear here within this conversation here, we're not suggesting that it's all about emotional expression.
No, not at all.
This is not what this conversation is about, right? Like we have, to me, emotional leadership is having an understanding around what is really needed at a specific moment.
Exactly.
And so the spectrums that we can move from or move into are containment, right? Containment of an emotion, learning to buffer an emotion, learning to override an emotion for a given time, compartmentalize it. I think these are all things that men can do so wonderfully, and I think we can use that as an asset. But don't fall subject to just pushing it under the rug.
Exactly.
Yeah. Suppress it for a given time, but then come back to it later.
Yeah. And I think that what that requires is presence. So if I'm present enough to see something arising, I'm then choosing to attend to that later, but also not suppressing it, as you said, right? But maybe it's also like I see it arising and it's okay in that moment to go into it, and that's also fine, right? But having the ability to choose rather than being, let's say, just suppressing it or being like completely taken over by a certain emotion. I think that is the capacity that I have to develop in order to like get to emotional leadership. Otherwise, I will either like suppress or be run by my emotions, which is then also not always helpful, right?
Big time. And I see what's really needed here is coming back to the point that you had addressed earlier. Most of us live in our heads. We actually now need to start orientating ourselves more towards our bodies, right?
Totally.
We need to learn to actually inhabit our bodies again.
Yeah.
Very simple exercise that one can use that, I like to offer a lot of individuals that I start working with is, every 30 minutes, every hour or so, ask yourself 3 questions. What am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? What am I needing? Like, it's very basic, and of course we can make it a lot more complex. But I think just that as an orientation can support individuals to start building a relationship back again with their bodies. Yeah. Because if you don't know what the fuck is going on in your own body, how are you supposed to be with the emotion?
I would also recommend any type of meditation that is not disassociation from what is here. There are techniques that are very oriented to basically sit, go in meditation, and then take a look at what's here in that moment. What is in my body? What's in my head? What are the sensations? What are my emotions? And these, like any modality that is like working with what is here in a moment. And that is then building the capacity to be with whatever it is that is there in the moment, I would recommend. I would not recommend any modality that is, let's say, directing awareness away from the body or away from emotions to then, put myself into that place where I don't have to feel anything and then rest in that for the rest of my life or what.
Emotional management.
Really doesn't work, right? So really important, because there can be a notion that meditation leads to to emotional suppression, which is not true if I'm choosing a modality that is working with what's really here. And not but there are good ones, definitely.
Yeah. So that to me speaks to what you had shared around this idea of building the capacity to be with an emotion. Is there anything else that comes up for you in terms of like how we can build that capacity? Other guys have as well a few things to throw in.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like any modality that helps me to, let's say, explore certain emotions while staying present, like such as, breathwork, for example, FBR to be a bit more precise, that can help to, let's say, experience a certain emotion while being altered state, while being present, and allowing me to experiencing that and developing a relationship to it. That's also quite helpful.
Yeah. What I guess want to add as well is that movement that was in some way connected to some form of mindfulness with an added element of breath had been incredibly supportive for me to actually withstand emotional intensity. Like with my practice in yoga for many years, as well as Qigong, I would say. Qigong is a little bit less intense, I would imagine. Not imagine, it's accurate. At least physically. Like being in very difficult yoga poses for long periods of time, it requires me to actually be with emotional stressors. It requires me to be with emotional intensity. And it's something that we can cultivate. It's something that we can build, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is a really good foundation to start from, because my assertion is that, for me, if I were to just offer a bit of a framework around this of how to lead ourselves emotionally in a skillful manner, I would always say, your triggers are in some ways your gateway to that. Yeah, they are your messengers. They are your signals. They are demonstrating to you where to place your attention. But if you don't have a capacity to actually be with those triggers yet, then it actually creates more suffering. Because now, like, you're aware of the fact that you're supposed to quote unquote be with your triggers, but you don't have the actual capacity for that. Then it just actually leads to like just a lot more chaos.
Yeah.
Right.
Agree.
So
Agree.
I think that as a starting point is really required. And I would argue when we have that capacity to actually be with emotion, that's where we can actually offer a genuine pause from the habituated behavior. And, we kind of spoke to the strategies that we all use in order to not actually feel what's there.
Yeah.
But the more we build that capacity, the more we can actually be with. When I was sharing with you the fact that, I saw this woman to my left and I was like, I wanted to speak to her. Everything in my body said, I didn't want to do that. But I've built the nervous system capacity to actually be with that emotion and do it anyways. So that really took a long time to build, but I would as well suggest, just for any man who's might be listening to this, just to gently nudge into that on a consistent basis, he'll experience a lot of effects already, just in a very short time period. At least that's what my experience has already been, if there's dedicated process involved.
Yeah.
And the last process or the last step that I would as well add to that is this idea of regulating oneself. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many ways of doing that. This could be through breath, movement, exercise can be a way to regulate, but it can also be a way to suppress, right? So we got to be really mindful of how we do it. It really depends on what our intention is.
Yeah.
It could be through cold immersion. It could be through nature. It could be through sound vocalization. Sound is really useful for regulating ourselves. It could be through creative expression, creative journaling or artistry, meditation, like all of that are aspects of how we can actually learn to regulate ourselves. But I think the important piece as well, just to add, is that it's important as well from us to move from cognition towards actually learning to just be with the raw sensation in the absence of story. Because usually there's going to be some story that's connected to it.
Yeah.
A lot of people attach to the fucking story of it.
Yeah.
Part of me is just like, it's not necessary.
Yeah.
Like just be with your breath and just be with the sensation itself.
Yeah. I want to add the idea of co-regulation here, because that is like, if you have, the right people around you, can be a friend, can be a romantic partner, they can offer a safe space and a well-regulated nervous system for you to have a process.
Yeah.
Right. And that can be quite a gift that we can gift each other. It's a beautiful gift to give to a partner. It's a beautiful gift to give to a friend. And it's, especially for men, very difficult to ask for that.
Mm.
And I would argue it's one of the most powerful, let's say, experiences that also have an opportunity to rewrite old stories in terms of this emotion is not safe to feel.
Yes.
Now I feel it, being witnessed by a friend or by my partner.
Yep.
Seeing that, oh, I have that emotion, I can go through it. The other person is still here. I'm still in love and connection with the other person, while my nervous system is receiving grounding and centering from the other nervous system that is holding the space. That can be a very impactful experience. And yeah, asking for it as a man is probably difficult, depending on, the conditioning that we have received.
It requires a lot of skill, and I think that as well weaves us beautifully into the subject matter of how to bring one's emotions into a relationship. I think there is a really important distinction here around that subject matter, to do that consciously, to do that
Yeah.
deliberately, right?
Yeah.
Because if we now start to invite that in relationship without the clear ask for that, it actually leads to caretaking behavior. It leads
Totally.
to us falling as victims into the relationship. I think there's also a really sticky dynamic it creates, especially when the man wants to receive containment from the woman. I'm not suggesting the fact that that is not something that we can't do as men. I think it can be, when we do it deliberately, when we actually create a structure around that and like bring clarity to that. But I think it also, it can take away from polarity. So we got to just be a little bit mindful of how we do that.
Yeah.
But it's, I guess, the essence or the core of what I'm attempting to communicate here is do it consciously.
Yeah. Yeah. Very consciously. Always checking in with your partner, what the capacity level is, if there's actually capacity right now to hold something or not.
Yep.
Right. And trying to not bring too much sorry, like speaking to my own truth, what I'm experiencing in my body right now in terms of like emotions, but like not projecting it on the other person.
You're not
Like,
suggesting, so you're not suggesting to blame or shame them?
I mean, it's kind of like suicide to say, hey, can you hold space for me? And by the way, like, it's all your fault. Like, I mean, I can try that, but good luck. Like, not going to work, right? Sounds simple, but it's actually, it's quite a skill to actually do that.
Absolutely. Taking ownership of our experience and like learning how to bring it skillfully,
Yeah.
in a way that we're just highlighting our experience versus like making them responsible for it, or even like projecting that they're at fault for whatever's happening.
And also something I would add is like, especially when it is in a romantic relationship and I know my partner well, so I can, let's say, I can have a very good idea of what story my partner could make of that emotion.
Yeah.
And it can kind of like, before I share, I can say, hey, this might bring up this, that, and the other in you. Let me just say, this is not what my intention is, and this is not what it is for me. And then I share.
Yes.
So to kind of like take away potential charge already. Because if I'm like, like I can imagine what if I say I have this and that emotion towards that happened, that then my partner could think this, that, or the other, and I could kind of like just, name that up front.
Yeah, it actually prepares them for, perhaps an unskillful communication from your end. I mean, I think I did that recently as well with you. I wasn't sure how to deliver a certain type of message. So I prefaced, hey, like this might come across as unskillfully. And like it's not my attempt, but it might come across as such, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's also a really good way to put it. I think, something just to add here on the subject matter is it requires our willingness, especially as men, to just drop the metaphorical armor and drop the weapon, or drop the weapons.
Yeah, man.
Like we just got to do that, especially as high performers and as well founders. Like I have this like image and this vision, like we're operating as warriors and operating as kings in our day-to-day basis. But like when you come home, just drop the fucking armor, drop the weapons, drop the masks.
Yeah.
Like just show up as you, whatever is showing up in that moment. Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, even if you believe that your partner doesn't know, she knows intuitively. Like she might not be able to like point exactly to what's happening, but intuitively she's feeling something.
Yep.
Right. And so I think it's really important as well for us to bring that willingness, and that as well just deepens the intimacy of what's there.
Mhm.
I think there's something incredibly powerful and strong in a man communicating, "Hey, listen, I'm getting reactive here right now."
Yeah.
That's
Oh yeah.
fucking that's emotional leadership.
Mhm.
To say,
100%.
"I'm getting reactive here right now. I think it's best for us just to take a slight pause and then return back to the conversation later."
Yeah. Agree, man.
One more thing I just want to add around this conversation around relationships is this idea that I would want to invite men to really take responsibility for the nourishment that they really require. Because I think
Mhm.
when we're not holding or leading ourselves emotionally, I see that we're showing up as these empty buckets.
Mhm.
These empty buckets that are all of a sudden wanting to be filled by our partners.
Yeah, man.
And that just creates so much unnecessary conflict in a relationship.
Mhm.
When you go on the journey of coming into deeper connection again with yourself, it's important to not just acknowledge what is there, the needs, the wants, the limitations, the boundaries, the things that are important, but actually act on it.
Mhm.
That's the demonstration of the leadership,
Mhm.
you know? And when we lead ourselves well, then we actually show up in relationship with a full cup.
Mhm.
We don't show up as these empty buckets that are then wanting validation, wanting approval, wanting love from our partners. It's not that like that is not that there's something wrong with that or it's not okay to have that, but it limits any of that codependency or that emotional strain that would otherwise occur. So I think that
Yeah.
is also a really important aspect just to name in terms of that conversation of
Yeah.
how this can show up in relationship.
Totally. Totally. It's just so it's actually an experience I made that recently and then just realized actually my system tends to resource itself through my partner. And then when her energy is depleted, then my system's like, what the fuck? Where do I find resource here?
Yeah.
And then I need to take care of it.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, listen, man, I realize we could really go on for another hour, perhaps even 2 hours. I mean, this is such a rich topic, and I think we explored the gist of what I wanted to dive into. So I'm really happy with what we had uncovered and as well explored. Yeah, I guess I just want to check in if there's anything that still feels open for you in terms of the subject matter, and then I'll ask you as well my final question on this.
Mm. Well, nothing really open, but just for me to, let's say, re-emphasize that emotional leadership will actually make any high performer a even more capable person with more impact, probably higher level of success, higher level of, let's say, quality of life.
Yep.
And yeah, in a certain way, also the more loving human being.
Mm.
And simply we're gonna invite way more joy into life.
Yep.
And creates that's a cool thing. It creates some independency of external success. So now if I'm more independent of my external success, likely I'm gonna have more external success
Mm.
because um I can really play and win, right? Because there's not so much to lose.
Yeah, there's
So I
not so much significance any longer.
exactly. Exactly. The reason why Elon Musk is where he is today, because he's constantly like, risk it to massive risk again and again. Like he's just, and at some point, if you can't fail, then you can only win.
Yeah.
Right. So I wouldn't underestimate that.
Yep. Beautiful. Well, listen, man, this was such a rich dialogue. And, as always, I mean, considering that you're coming on here for a number of episodes, I'll make sure as well to put all your details in the show notes so listeners as well can find you. Last thing I might just want to add as well is just the importance of um, regular maintenance, right? And that we create environments
Mm-hmm.
that allow us to be regularly supported. Find men's circles, find breathwork circles.
Yeah.
Don't just rely on your partner.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
literally have brothers along your side. If I haven't been in men's circles for the last 5 years, I wouldn't be who I am
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be where I am today. If I didn't have people around me that I could bring my experience to sometimes they're coaches, sometimes they're therapists, sometimes they're practitioners, sometimes they're mentors, sometimes they're friends. I wouldn't be where I am today. And I would argue design a life where you get to have that as an experience, because I think our success really demands that and requires that of us.
100% agree.
Amazing. Well, thanks again for coming on for this conversation.
You, man.
Listeners, I hope you got a lot of value from this. As you might be able to tell, both of us are super passionate about the subject matter, and I hope you got a lot of value as always. Make sure to pay it forward to someone who you might think would receive value from this. Until next time, signing off. Thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.